Holbrook Travel is pleased to bring you this webinar today, The Story of the Indian Tiger with Amit Sankhala. India is a global biodiversity hotspot, home to a remarkable array of wildlife, perhaps none so well known as the tiger. Fewer than 4,000 of these majestic big cats are thought to remain in the wild, and they face continued threats like habitat loss and poaching. During the presentation today, we'll get a look at India's incredible biodiversity. We'll have a look at what the safari experience is like in Africa, in India, and how it compares to the safari experience in Africa. And we'll hear a little bit about the history of the Sankhala family, whose conservation work was highlighted in the 2019 documentary Tigerland. We'll also hear about some of the present day realities and challenges facing tiger conservation and the role that tourism plays in these efforts. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So again, please feel free to share any questions that you have. Our special guest today is activist Amit Sankhala. Amit carries on his family's legacy of tiger conservation and sustainable tourism. Amit is the grandson of renowned conservationist Kailash Sankhala, who was known as the Tiger Man of India and whose efforts led to key changes in India's treatment of tigers with the support of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Amit's father, Pradeep Sankhala, established the Kanha and Bandhavgarh jungle lodges to share the untamed beauty of these two national parks. Amit is an active trustee of Tiger Trust, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uniting local communities in conservation. He also owns, operates, and manages Jamtara Wilderness Camp and the Kanha and Bandhavgarh jungle lodges. We're joined today by Holbrook Travel's Vice President of Product Development, Pulin Karaja. Pulin's been with Holbrook Travel since 1998, and in that time, she's worked with Amit to coordinate some of the travel programs that help support this conservation work. She herself is an avid photographer and first visited India in 2008. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Pulin, who will talk a little bit about how the relationship between Amit and Holbrook Travel came about. Welcome, Pulin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining to our webinar this afternoon. We are really excited to have Amit together with us. As Lindsay mentioned, our story together with Amit started in 2008. And as part of it, we started working in India for conservation and natural history programs. Personally, me and a lot of people that I had known looked for India mainly for cultural programs. India has a huge history and great people, great culture, but the natural history side of it, the parks are not necessarily that well known. A lot of the tourism that happens in the country doesn't necessarily visit the national parks as much. The safari experience is not very widely known. So my first trip, I was certainly blown away with the experience that I had, the hospitality that Amit had shown, the people of India, how they take care of you, what you can just like see, learn, do. And we have been just like very happy to be part of his story for the last 12 years. So without further ado, I would like to give the microphone to Amit to take us on a journey through India.
Thank you, Pulin. Oh, I'm very close by. Thank you, Pulin, for that introduction. My name is Amit. I'm from India, in that small country that has just 1.2 billion people. Not a lot. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. India, very biodiverse country. I mean, we speak over 2,000 dialects, over 250 languages. So you can imagine the 4 metropolitan cities of India, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, and Chennai, speak 4 completely different languages. So imagine how we communicate to each other. It is in every part of India, 50 kilometers north, south, east, west, in any direction you go for India, everything changes. The food changes, the color changes, everything other than money changes. But what happens is that even with that, the diversity that we have in the country is also very, very different in different parts of the country. So let's go over, and I'm going to start by showing a small video. And just to give you a heads up, the audio might be a little bit loud. So if you want to adjust while the video plays, and then we'll talk more about the diversity of wildlife in India.
This is wild Karnataka.
Imagine I've shown you a video from just one state in India. I haven't even gone to proper India yet. This is not full diversity of India. This is just one state of Karnataka and showing its diversity on what it has. And isn't that fascinating? Just being in that part of the region alone. Wildlife is spread throughout the country. There's tigers, leopards, wild dogs, bears, elephants, Asiatic lions, striped hyenas, crocodiles, you name it, we have it. I mean, at the top of our tongue, whenever we say, wildlife, we want to think Africa. But think India. India actually has a pretty amazing diversity of what we have. And even beyond Africa, Africa talks about the big five. We have the lions, we have the wild buffaloes, the elephants, the tigers, the leopards, wild dogs, striped hyenas. The diversity is immense, and it goes much, much, much beyond. And in every different types of landscape that we enjoy, from the Thar Desert to the west, to the Himalayas of the north, to the dense jungles in central and southern India, to the mangroves in the east. The diversity in different type of climates exists throughout the country. And the distribution of tigers is spread throughout the country again. Other than west of India, tigers are present almost everywhere in India. So we have about 50 national parks in our country, which is home to almost 80% of the tigers in the wild. Unfortunately, today there's less than 5,000 tigers in the wild today, but over 10,000 in captivity. India's last census says that we had about 3,000 tigers, but we will get more into it, and we'll talk a little bit about the issues surrounding conservation and tigers and what the challenges a country like India has to face to preserve its wilderness. So we talk a little bit about the tiger, Panthera tigris. There's unfortunately today we've lost the South China tiger, the Java tiger, the Caspian tiger. Indo-Chinese tiger is almost gone. It may be somewhere in captivity. The only ones remaining in the wild today are the Siberian tiger, the Sumatran tiger, and the Bengal tiger. And Bengal tiger is the tigers that you actually find in India. So hence the population of less than 5,000 that we say that is there in the world combines these three different species of tigers. They're solitary hunters and weigh anywhere from 300 to 500 pounds. And the excitement of seeing a tiger is very different from seeing lions in Africa. It's a whole process of actually tracking a tiger, listening to alarm calls, tracking pug marks, understanding the territories of each female tigress or a male tiger. This is the mother and her cubs, from a young age to adulthood. They usually are with their mother anywhere up till 2 years of age. Sometimes even 20 months, they start to separate from their mother. But usually a tigress gives about 4 cubs. And even given the infant mortality rate, even if 2 survive, that is usually considered a healthy habitat. A successful mother can bring up to 4 cubs to adulthood. And there is a tigress which has reached now the Guinness Book of World Record for bringing over 30 cubs into a national park, which means successful breeding, successful bringing up the cubs, and no mortality, which is quite rare. We also have the sloth bear. We've all seen the Jungle Book, and we talk about the Jungle Book. It is here in central India where Jungle Book was placed. The tigers, the leopards, the bears, the wild dogs. This is a great shot of Todd Gustafson, who's also, I believe you heard him a week or two ago. And it's a great diversity shot of Kanha National Park in central India with the sal trees, with the sal leaves fallen down, spotted deer, which are present throughout the country, the gaur on the left. Gaur is like an Indian bison. Of course, we talked about the leopards. These are our wild dogs, very different from the ones in Africa. Usually in packs from anywhere from 4 to 14 to 20. Indian elephant, a little bit smaller than the African elephant. Unlike the African elephant, only the male have tusks. Also present almost throughout the country, not so much in central India, but everywhere in the east, in the north, in the south. Because the West is reserved for another great beauty, which is the Asiatic lion. So the Asiatic lion dominates in Gujarat, which is completely west of India. And there are no tigers or elephants or wild dogs in those particular areas, but you do see leopards. So the west of India is a great diversity on its own, where you can do a trip just to see striped hyenas, wolf, leopards, lions. It is one of the greatest places to see flamingos, amazing scenery. Striped hyena, a little different from the African hyena. Unlike Africa, they are very shy animals in India. Of course, if you go south, you have an opportunity to see the black panther, which is, there's a national park called Nagarhole, and they've been seeing them probably 4 to 5 times a week. What a great photographic opportunity one can have going down there. One-horned rhinos to the east. This is completely east of India, northeast of India in Assam. Very different from the two-horned rhino of Africa. Everybody talks about the poaching cases that are happening in Africa, rhinos being poached. And yes, it is a catastrophe what's happening out there. The equal amount of problems are with the Indian rhino as well. Indian rhinos were down to less than 200 rhinos in the wild at one point. When a shoot-to order was given to protect a national park, is saying, do whatever you do, save these rhinos. Today, there's well over 1,500 one-horned rhino. This is from the 70s. It was implemented in 30 years, 40 years. They have really done very well in that region. And I imagine that whole area is a border area. Countries' border areas are generally very sensitive because when it smuggles, it goes right out. And they have been able to preserve, but still they go through gun battles almost on a monthly basis with poachers. And it is and they also lose a lot of rhinos to flooding, unfortunately, every year. The Gharial crocodile, the marsh crocodile, the red panda found in near Darjeeling area, again, closer to the northeast of India. And diversity of birds. India is one of those amazing hotspots with all different landscapes and biodiversity that you can get many different species of birds within one country. We all talk about the peacock, but look at the Asian paradise flycatcher, the white bird that you see at the bottom. Stunning, the tragopan, the vultures. And throughout the country, we are close to about 1,000 species of bird. All of Africa has 1,000 species of bird. Remember, whenever I say all of Africa, remember also that Africa is a continent, India is a country. And I'm comparing India as a country to the continent of Africa in the biodiversity that we have. I'm going to narrow it down right now for a minute to central India. This is Madhya Pradesh. This is one of the highest density of tigers anywhere in the world. People usually ask me, what are the chances of seeing a tiger? Well, in the 5 popular national parks of Madhya Pradesh, if you spend about 3 nights, there's a very good chance that you're going to see them 2 or 3 times. Of course, it is wilderness and never a guarantee. And the reason I say that is because the density of tigers in this particular area is one of the highest in India. Make sure you have a good naturalist with you whenever you go. And most of the safaris are done by 4x4. So there's hardly any walking. There is one park that you can walk as well. So, but unlike Africa, majority of the safaris are done in 4x4 vehicles. And between the national park, whenever you go to one national park, it is not that you will go to all 5 national parks and they will be the same. The diversity and the topography of the park. One is a sal forest, one is a teak forest, one has rivers flowing through them, one has hills throughout. It is completely different from each other. So within a week, 10 days, I would say completely a good 2-week trip will give you a great sort of a jungle book trip as we talk about tigers, leopards, wild dogs, bear. And one of the best times to go, and also easy for us because of the weather and the climatic conditions, is October to April. So between those months is a good time to go to see wilderness in India. Not because that is the best time for animals per se, but it's also post-April, it really starts to get close to 110 to 120 Fahrenheit. So you can imagine how hot it can get in months of May and June. Our national parks in India, unlike Africa, actually shut down by June 30th, and they reopen around October 1st. So that period is monsoon. So it is literally nonstop rain. The roads in our parks are dirt roads, so they have to be remade and sort of giving nature a break. And then they reopen in October. Hence, I say that later in October and then all the way up to April is usually a good time for wildlife. And then depending on what you're exactly after for good wildlife, good wild dog sightings, or seeing the Barasinga, which are one of the deers in central India, a success story there with the antlers, the massive antlers, to photograph them is a good time maybe in December to go. When is a good time for tigers? People ask me. And, you know, I used to say particular month that as it gets hotter, tigers are seen more waterhole. But in the recent times, you know, let's say even global warming has contributed to it. It isn't as much cold anymore. And you do see tigers almost all the time, you know, between those months, because as soon as April, May, June, that starts to sink in, tigers move closer to waterholes, and sometimes the waterholes are too far away from the road that you can access. So you cannot drive everywhere. You still have to stay on track, but still, here's a typical sighting. This is a mother and 3 cubs walking down the road. पीछे करो यार It's too close. That's amazing. Jesus Christ. Is that the 3 cubs? Yeah, that's the 3 cubs. So these were close to 13-month-old cubs, still sticking with their mother. They will till they learn to hunt properly, and then they will move off their own ways. But just to give you an idea of sighting, you know, tigers have sort of become habituated over time that vehicles are not a threat. So they do walk by very close by. So photographic opportunities can be amazing. Why am I telling you this story? You know, why am I here? This is why I'm here. My father, my grandfather, the contributions that they have done to wildlife sort of passed on the legacy to what I do today. My grandfather was very, in the 1950s, my grandfather was responsible for issuing hunting permits right after the British had just left, and to give a hunting permit to go kill tigers. And one day around campfire, you know, he was a forest ranger at that point in time. It was like, you got to kill your own tiger to move up the ranks. That's how it happens. You know, bureaucracy in 1950s. And he killed his first tiger. And he felt so sad and so taken aback by that he felt so guilty that he wrote and wrote and wrote about it, and he dedicated his rest of his life to preserving tigers in the wild. In the 1960s, he was made director of Delhi Zoo, which gave him an opportunity to actually study tigers very close up, because this is tiger's name is Jim, the one he's posed with. And Jim's mother had died, his mother had been poached, and Jim was given to Indira Gandhi, on the left, you can see that, by the forest officer from that national park, and she could not bring him into the prime minister's house, so she gave it to my grandfather. Instead of my grandfather leaving Jim in the zoo, such a young cub, he brought Jim home. And Jim grew up till about age 3 in my grandfather's house, which gave him an opportunity to actually study the traits of a tiger. And then he wrote various books on his scientific studies on Jim. And by 1968, he got a fellowship called the Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship to actually understand what the situation of the tiger was. And were there tigers really dying? What was happening? And who was going to raise an alarm for the tigers? And he presented his paper in around 1969 at the IUCN conference that happened in Delhi. And that was when it was recognized that there is less than 5,000 tigers left in the world, in the wild today. And there needs to be something done about it. Something needs to be done about it. And at first they began by issuing an order that no mother should be killed. Only male tigers should be killed or given for hunting permits. And by 1971, they started something called Project Tiger. And the idea of Project Tiger was to establish national parks through the country. You know, create the safe haven habitat for the tiger. Remember, tiger is just a poster boy. You save the tiger, you save everything around it, the habitat, everything gets saved because the tiger presence is there. So once a Project Tiger area was named, that complete national park was protected. And these parks are big. I showed you Kana earlier. Kana is 2,000 square kilometers. Bandhavgarh, again in central India, right in the center you can see, is well over 1,100 square kilometers. So the areas that they preserved was quite massive at that point. And the manpower to actually do such a big project throughout the country was the first of its kind. In 1971, in 1973, it really came into action, and they started with 9 tiger reserves initially. And it was because of pretty much the political backing of a great prime minister like Indira Gandhi, who actually saved forests. That was one of her strong beliefs, to actually save environment, save forests. And yes, so that's how the story began. And my father in the early 80s, in the late 80s, set up some of the first sort of lodges and camps in India, which didn't really exist. All you had were forest rest houses. And since then on, we've done a lot of work in conservation as well as tourism. I'm going to introduce you to one of our camps. This is again in central area in a place called Pench. That video that you saw with the mother and cubs has been shot in this park. I'm going to show you a small video of the camp as well. This is Jamtara Wilderness Camp in central India, which I discovered this tree, which was in a dry riverbed. At this time in the monsoon, it's completely underwater. And the whole story of my camp began around the community that lives around this tree in the village called Jamtara. And in India, it's all about community. If you don't have community participation in what you do in that particular area, there's no point of going there. The whole idea, the community has to be involved in everything that you do. So keeping that mission in mind, I created a 10-tented camp. And the idea was that nothing I would do, I would not cut a tree, and I would not buy new furniture out there. So everything at this camp, for example, the flooring in the rooms here comes from the flooring of ships. I went to the graveyard of ships of Asia, and I bought 20 tons of wood from the flooring of ships. And I used that as my flooring in my rooms. On the right, you see the table belongs to the Supreme Court of India from 50 years ago. They were getting rid of 12 of those tables, and we got a carpenter together and put together these old nostalgic table. The art piece on the left that you see is made out of motorcycle engine and spoons and valves from the motorcycle and shock absorbers as its feet. So everything at the camp has a story to tell. We had these doors in central India on the left, as you see, old doors in schools, in government buildings, and people were throwing and getting rid of them. We chopped them out and made the only sort of blue flooring in India that's out there. We went to forest rest houses and we collected old chairs from forest rest houses and we did them up with leather, just to bring sort of a sense of story to the whole thing. Of course, farm to table food, everything that we eat is grown around us. And we created a thing called the star bed model. It's one of the very few ones that you see in India. See, villagers have slept in something like this, maybe not as fancy, for generations, and they protect their crops. And what we wanted to do was create an area where we would see the wildlife that passes through their land. So we pay them money, and we have these star beds and sort of community lands where we say, we will do the star bed model where we will pay you to sleep every night that we come and sleep out there to see wildlife. We've seen wild dogs, we've seen bears, we every time see deers, of course, wild boars, and just the amazing sky. The starry nights is stunning. But let's also focus, 5 minutes on challenges our wildlife faces today. And as we all know that India is sort of a developing country. Everybody knows where India is on the map. And, just like it is a rising power, it has a big population of 1.2 billion people, which means a lot of demand for better infrastructure, for better electricity, for better roads. And unfortunately, because of that, we face a challenge that there's so much pressure on the environment that we are losing our corridors, as we talk about. Now, this is, this particular map expresses, on the left talks about elephant corridors. Then there's tiger corridors, there's leopard corridors that we can look into. And unfortunately, the demand for making bigger and bigger highways is there. There are solutions that are coming. For example, the picture that you see of the tiger at the bottom is sort of, they created a flyover so they can create an area for wildlife to pass from under. We never thought it would be successful. Having said that, up till this year, this particular highway, the tigers crossed about 70 times. So maybe it is working. I don't know. It is something that, we have to live with today, unfortunately. The fortunate part is that in a country like India, where we have so many people, 1.2 billion people, you can imagine the pressure on land just alone. But we still have an active forest department. We still have a powerful ideology which says conserve nature, conserve environment. I'll give you a small example in a second. Let me share other things. One of the big cat problems is, of course, poaching that we see around the world for wild animals. I have to say that over the last 20 years or 25 years, poaching has gotten less and less and less, just because there has been more stringent rules around conservation, particularly of tigers. And there's a lot more vigilant eye and much more social media. So if something happens, it blows out of proportion, which is great for the tiger. And lastly, we also see that villages are expanding more and more and more. Where are the leopards going to go? Now, this is a picture. The top two leopard images are of Bombay. Now, Mumbai has expanded so much that it's gone into leopard territory. And leopards can be literally found on top of apartment buildings. It's not that these leopards have just come in. These leopards have always been here. It's just Mumbai has expanded and expanded and expanded. The pictures at the bottom are elephant corridors. Again, more farming is happening, more and more people. And how do you curb that? The one good thing that we have today is that there are pockets of these national parks that were created under Project Tiger, which is well over 50 national parks throughout the country. They are still safe havens for wild animals in our country. Here's a good article which says Tiger census shows positive trend, but what about the deaths of endangered species in non-protected area? So what it's saying is that protected area is what we talk about when we talk about national parks. These big areas of national parks, which no hunting can happen. Hunting is not allowed in India for anything. It was banned long time ago. And if somebody's caught with hunting, they are literally jailed overnight. But today, the problem is that outside, we do not have fences. Hence, literally, animals can come out and go in. It's just when you actually look at a land and you see national park on the right side and a non-protected area on the left side is completely farmed, whereas on the right side is completely forest. So there is that one divide, but animals come out for easy prey sometimes, like to get a cattle or to get a dog, a domestic dog. And because of that, there are casualties that happen, and there's a human-animal conflict that is very much there. Let me share one other thing with you. What I have realized, and you know, I'm a little bit biased because I'm in this industry of tourism, but tourism is something that has helped us keep a watchful eye on the tigers today. To give you a small example, I'll take an example of a Bandhavgarh National Park, which is 1,100 square kilometers, but we are only allowed to go into 20% of the land in any national park in India. That is the Supreme Court law, which says that we can only access, which is still big enough, which is almost 150 to 200 square kilometers of Bandhavgarh we can go into. This park has about 65 tigers. Over 35 of them are seen in this 20% area, which means over 50% of the tigers exist in 20% of the land. What does that tell us? It tells us that day in and day out, when we are actually in there for tourism, providing jobs in the local villages, to the local drivers, to the local guides, anything that may happen, we have every interest to protect that tiger rather than kill that tiger. We will report it. That's why a lot more in national parks, the tiger numbers have grown drastically. Not drastically, I can't really say drastically. We were down to 1,400 tigers, and there's close to 3,000 tigers in the wild today. That's over a period since 2012. So the tiger numbers have definitely gone up. There is so much reporting that I'll give you an example. There was a tiger named Ustad. Ustad was a very popular tiger of this national park called Ranthambore. Ranthambore is a very popular national park in India. When Ustad became, unfortunately, a man-eater, as they called it, just because Ustad killed a cow, somebody tried to protect that cow, Ustad killed a particular person. Slowly, Ustad now at this point had killed 6 people. Overnight, the government picked up the tiger, tranquilized it, and took it to a zoo 200 kilometers away. There was an uproar because that tiger was popular and everybody knew. So everybody sort of in the tourism fraternity and even the children of India were all hashtagging Save Ustad. 1 million people tweeted. 10,000 children took a vigil to the Prime Minister's gate and said, Save Ustad. That's all they said. Now, all for the wrong reasons, because as somebody who knows nature and understands that, that tiger needed to be shifted out. Otherwise, the villagers would have killed it. But the fact is that the power of social media was so amazing that today, if 1 million people are tweeting about one tiger because it died, it is amazing that the children of tomorrow, 10,000 children walk to the Prime Minister's gate with a vigil in their hands to say, save this tiger, please. You know, that means we have a future for tomorrow. That's enough to say. Luckily, in our country, we have 50 national parks, and every growing children have access to a national park not too far away from them. And this is ingrained from a very young age. We always talk about Africa. Let me give you one statistic. Over 90% of Africans have actually never been on a safari or seen a lion in the wild. The first lady of Kenya went on her first safari 2 years ago. 2 years ago. In India, it's completely the opposite. Majority of the traffic that goes to Indian National Park are Indians. And from a young age, at some point or the other, your parents take you to a wilderness area. And it is a part of almost the curriculum of you growing up, which is the beauty. And this is where the boat bank is. When somebody is making a highway through the Serengeti, who's talking? A bunch of conservationists and a bunch of tourism people? But where is the power lies? Power lies in the boat bank, in the power of the people. And that in India, I have to say, is quite strong because we are one of the biggest democracies in the world. I'm going to leave you with a little bit more information than just tigers. So you see this amazing landscape, which is the Himalayas. And there is an amazing predator that lives in Ladakh, which is in the northern part of India. Amazing for photography, but amazing for snow leopards. One of the most majestic animals, I would say. Again, I do a lot of things out of video, so I will show you a short video, and I might forward a little bit just because of time's sake. Wasn't that stunning? And the northern Ladakh area is just fantastic. Even for you can even get the foxes and wolf and ibex and snow leopards, and yeah, the diversities again throughout the country wherever you go is quite amazing. This is a picture of the snow leopard lodge up on the left, a new program that Holbrook's putting together. And then beyond that, I'm just going to run through a couple of slides here. Amazing diversity of tribes throughout the country. And these tribes have been living with wilderness for generations. It's just stunning. When you go to India, it's not just about the wildlife, it's always about the culture as well. This is in the northeast of the country at the Hornbill Festival, right where the rhinos are. And lastly, if you ever get a chance, you want to see a film on our family, which is called Tigerland, which sort of released a year ago at the Sundance Film Festival. It's on Discovery Channel. You may find it on Discovery Go. Otherwise, I think we will also do a newsletter with Holbrook to see if you guys can see the film. All right, Pelin, I think I talked a lot. Thank you.
And we can certainly listen to you for another hour without any breaks. Be still my heart. I mean, the images are out there bringing so many memories. I actually see a lot of names who are attending, who have been on the programs. I know they are all remembering the first time they have seen the tigers in the wild. I certainly remember my first, and I can to this day feel the butterfly in my stomach. I can almost remember what I was smelling around me, the forest. It is a magical destination. I mean, you have already discussed some of this, but we are getting quite a lot of questions, and please keep them coming. Do you have a favorite park of your own? What are some of the best national parks for tiger viewing?
You know, people talk about, and I see the question on there about Ranthambore National Park. It is beautiful. It is a stunning park. I grew up there as a young child. I'm just around that national park, and it's become a victim of its own success, unfortunately. So it is still great for tigers, but there are almost 150 hotels. So you can imagine this is like the core of, just because it sits right next to the Taj Mahal, right next to Jaipur, which is a very popular cultural city. So if you want to round up a trip, which is a quick, you know, let me see one cultural city, let me see the Taj Mahal, let me see a tiger and get out, great. Ranthambore is actually a beautiful park to visit that. Just be aware of the crowds when you're there. I particularly like to go to central India. I'm also biased because I also own camps in that particular area. But Bandhavgarh, Kana is one of my favorite parks, just because of the diversity it provides. There's opportunities to see everything from wild dogs to sloth bears to tigers to leopards, and just a very beautiful South Forest National Park. It really reminds you of the Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book when you actually read it. It actually is very much like that. So between Kanha and Pench, there's a corridor, and this corridor is amazing. So if you cover these three parks, Bandhavgarh, Kanha, and Pench, it's just a great diversity of that you will bring in. You will do about 200 species of birds easy in that type of a trip.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I really loved how you explained how the Indian people are actually part of the conservation, how they are already visiting their own country and learning about the resources and appreciating the natural beauty. As part of this, how supportive is the current Indian government towards the ideals of Project Tiger? Is tiger conservation support growing? Are there any challenges that you are facing from the government?
Unfortunately, in India, government keeps changing. It's one of the biggest democracy that also means that it was always keep changing, and every 4 or 5 years you may get a whole different ideology in the government who is very pro-industrialization, wants to do mining and cut out the forests, or the other one wants to really protect the forests and give jobs to the people by doing that. But I think that in our constitution, we have ingrained forest environment so well that today, there is no hunting that can happen in India. B, there is a massive penalty for anybody who's caught poaching. And yes, we are cutting through our corridors, but luckily we are saving whatever the national park and Project Tiger reserves there are. There's nothing that can change that. No government can just pass an order to do mining in a national park. It does not happen. I've seen that happen in some places in Africa. I've seen it happen in like Madagascar, 90% is gone. I've seen it happen in Uganda, even when I landed in Murchison Falls. But in India, in any national park, there would be an outcry if there is any sort of commercial activity that happens inside national park, which I'm very thankful for today. But that's what I say, that it doesn't matter what the governments come and do. Yes, they will cause harm in many different ways. I mean, the air in Delhi is hard to breathe at sometimes, but when you go out to a national park, it is still pure, because we definitely have a constitution that is protecting our forests and our environment very well.
Okay, thank you for that. You have already spoken a little bit about the community participation, especially around parks. I know you already have some camps in some of those precious regions. What are some of the things that you and your camps are doing to bring the community in? How are the buffer zones working? What is some of the relationship between the camps and the people living around the national parks?
Well, the thing is, in any area that we go to, any area that we influence, we need to understand that we always do hire from local. We need to train local, whether it is from a 20-kilometer radius around us. They're the people who know the wildlife the best, and they're the ones who've been battling wildlife for their crops, whatever need, for their cattle sometimes. And if we give them job and an opportunity in different ways, then that's a benefit to them. For us in Jamtara, that was the community share, the star bed model, where we would give revenue to people. And now we are working on a much bigger plan where we would take 25 families from the Jamtara village and sort of make a commune, and it would become sort of India's first conservancy. It's actually almost on its last stages. And once that happens, then we can employ those 25 families to actually protect the very much land that they used to farm. If that happens, that will be a brilliant story for India, because this 80 acres of land sits between a national park and a buffer zone forest. And if that corridor unites, then it will be a much bigger benefit to the whole community. I'm going to I'll tell you one more example. I went to see snow leopards back 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I stayed in a little homestay that was there. And the guy who owned the homestay, I had 6 clients with me. He looked at my camera and he said, "Oh, you have a nice camera. Where do you live?" I said, "I live in Delhi." He said, "You should give me a number." I said, "Why?" He said that when the snow leopard kills my yak next time, I'm going to give you a call. I said, "Oh, okay, cool." He says, the snow leopard will sit on my yak for about 5 to 6 days, and then it will be wolves, and then it'll be fox, and then it'll be lammergeiers. So it'll be a 12-day cycle that you can come and photograph. It was brilliant of him to think in a tourism way, saying that you're going to come here, stay in my house, give me money, and while my yak dies, you will give me money and more than what the yak is worth, and which is completely true. And that man today has set up 9 rooms and runs the snow leopard lodge. So a complete example of a person whose yak, whose cattle, whose everything used to get hunted because he was in such a remote area, snow leopards would come and grab it, but now he's turned that around. And it's no longer baiting or anything like that happening, but he exactly knows where the snow leopards are. And there are people who come from around the world to see it. So success stories of community getting involved in conservation is more and more today.
Wow, wow. That's great information. Thank you again. One of our participants is asking about your opinion about Tadoba Park for tiger viewing.
Absolutely fascinating park. I think one of the highest density of tigers anywhere there is in India is in Tadoba National Park. But the problem I find with Tadoba National Park, it's mined from 3 sides. It's literally one of the biggest mining districts of India. And as soon as you step outside the national park, there is a mine in every corner of it. And that's what has stopped a corridor from building in many different areas. There is a corridor in one particular area. And so when you go to the national park, you do see tigers, but they can't go anywhere. And that is sometimes not a healthy habitat. I think I still think it's a great park. It is a very popular park. And I think tigers is what you go to see there. But if you want diversity, then you come into central India after the gaur, the barasingha, the leopards, the bears. Whereas tigers, I think Tadoba is a great park. And combine it with a Pench, because it's only a 4 or 5 hour drive, or a Kana, a Pench and a Kana. So it can always be a network. But Tadoba is also, I definitely think it is a good park as well.
Wow. Where is it at? I actually have not heard about that national park before.
Tadoba, yeah, it's right next to Nagpur. It's about 5 hours from Pench.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we already support tiger conservation as part of the program costs whenever we run programs. I know you also support tiger conservation with tourism as well. Is there an organization that supports this in India among other tourism companies, or what are some of the other things that travelers can do to support the work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we run a nonprofit called Tiger Trust, which has been around since my grandfather days, and we do a lot of work under that. But beyond that, there are many other organizations doing great work. I highly speak of, WPSI, which is Wildlife Protection Society of India, which is excellent. EIA, which is Environmental Investigation Agency. I believe they're registered in the US as well, and in England, Wildlife Trust of India. I think all these are working in sort of grassroots levels, doing different things. I do a lot of lobbying for, conservation money, which goes towards, like we did $45,000 for snow leopards last year alone, out of which about $15,000 came directly from every traveler that came, about $250 donation to a snow leopard conservancy, and the rest of the money we lobbied through different channels that we have. So our big arm is also lobbying for different projects, and the money doesn't come to us or touch our travel company. The idea is to go directly to the source where it belongs, because we already make our money doing what we do in tourism, and we don't want to see that any tax cuts happen by the time the money gets to the end traveler. Of course, a part of your journey gets donated towards the community work in that particular area. Always ask about it. Please feel free to ask about it, and it needs to be shown to you when you're there. Sometimes it is not something which is tangible that you can see right there. Sometimes it's education. Sometimes it's anti-poaching units. Sometimes it's just donating water tanks to the forest guards who haven't had clean water in a long time. So things like that keep happening all the time.
Okay. Well, one of the question in everyone's mind is the current pandemic. We talked a lot about a lot of communities being dependent on tourism. We also talked about how tourists help keep poaching in check. How have the last 5 months without tourism affecting the parks and the poaching pressure?
I think the biggest pressure that's going to come, that a lot of people who became unemployed from big cities, and we saw the crisis of what they call the migrant workers, who were working in big cities like Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore, all ended up going back home. Once they go back home, then the pressure again on natural resources grows. And at this point, it has been about small game like, chickens or something from the forest. They'll go to hunt so they can get food because their villages sometimes didn't even let them in. Now, today, the problem is that since there is no tourism in majority of the areas of India, all the lodges are sitting on the brink of sort of collapse. And tomorrow, if hundreds and thousands of people get unemployed, whereas the guides, the drivers, the cooks, everybody who's worked their lives in tourism, they belong to the local villages in the area for the last 25 years, and they haven't done farming in that long, then what is going to happen when they go back home? Are we going to be able to sustain? How long do we sustain? We can go 6 months, a year, and then what? The big question is that right now. And will that cause a great pressure on the environment for way more farming, way more cutting down of forests, poaching to rise? All that goes hand in hand with different things. During the pandemic, nobody sort of wanted to go back because of the shutdown. The forest rangers that were inside the park, they could not go back home to their families. And the moment they did go back to the farm, the new guys couldn't come in because there was a shutdown in place. And everybody was too far. Everybody was scared of the forest fires that would happen and burn down our forests. Luckily, it wasn't that bad this year, but it was just a tipping point. Again, same thing. It could collapse at this point. So this is a problem that we face, not just in India, but we see it in the world today. And you will see this for jaguars, you will see this for Africa, you will see this for India. And by next year, if there is no revival, we will see thousands and thousands of sort of wilderness camps and lodges around the world go bankrupt. And then what will happen? Who will conserve? Where will the money come from? And how will we save our forests? It'll be a big question. I mean, we went literally from a very good trajectory of no plastic, no plastic, no plastic to plastic, plastic, plastic. It's just, one-time use and throw it away. So it's sad, but it's the new reality, I guess.
Hope we are not going to start learning how to travel virtually through Zoom and go back to normal pretty soon. There is actually a great question. Do you do online conservation programs for teachers, or are you aware of any organization that might do this for tigers or other endangered species?
A great organization is called 17,000 Feet. Write that down. And 17,000 Feet is an organization that works particularly in Ladakh. And it's started by a lady named Sujata. She used to live in the US back in the day, but then she moved back to India. And what she's doing is she mapped out all the schools in Ladakh. And then she maintains libraries in all the schools. There was 230 schools she mapped out. The government didn't even know those schools existed. Let's put it that way. It was remote regions. And then she started teacher training courses and started to train teachers and make them aware, not just about the language, but also about wildlife in the particular area, and which has been a phenomenal success. So do look that up and do contact her. You can do it right off that website. And I'm sure for snow leopards, that could be quite interesting to do. But in education, I don't think the conservation world has come online as much as how tourism has come with webinars and Zooms and all that kind of stuff. So I think the teaching world is still, still getting there, trying to understand. So I know many people who are doing education programs on the ground in villages, in communities, but they definitely don't have the means. But it might be a great way to put something. If somebody has a great idea, just definitely run it by me, because there's definitely a Zoom sort of thing can happen, and kids from a different part of the world can talk about the wildlife they see around them.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in here as a time check and say we have time for maybe just one or two more questions.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. So we are actually getting some questions about the snow leopards as well. What is the best time to travel to see the snow leopards?
Snow leopards, particularly anytime between November to April, this whole sort of science behind it goes that as the snow melts, the snow leopards move higher and higher to the ridges. And it is not a great time, well, it's not great, it's about great time, but we can't really go that high in hiking. The snow leopard trip is actually meant to be quite an easy trip. You need to be a good hiker, walker, and you need to be able to acclimatize quite well. By well, I mean the max you'll get up to is 4,000 meters. So it's not ridiculous. You spend 2 days acclimatizing. So the months of November all the way till April is a good time. And then the snow starts to melt and they go higher and higher. So the prey moves down, the snow leopards move down. Simple philosophy. I think February, March, late January is a great time. Christmas, New Year time is actually not bad, but it's cold. I mean, we're talking negative 20 degrees centigrade. So, you know, I don't know what that is.
Just that.
Just that, yeah.
Florida girl.
but somebody did ask, what is the name of the snow leopard lodge described? It is actually called the Snow Leopard Lodge. And it's got heating and a real bathroom, which is a big blessing up there. Yeah, but you do see snow leopards, and it's fascinating. It's one of our most popular trips. Usually sells out a year in advance.
As there are more questions about snow leopards, I'm gonna start crying. That was the trip I was supposed to be on last year, and I hurt my back, and I'm still crying about that. And I see some names on here that have been on that trip. So, move on. I'm gonna ask you one last question, Amit. I mean, you are the third generation in your family doing this. As a family-owned company, we certainly feel very connected to you in that. And I know you have kids on your own. I'm sure they have been to the parks. How would you describe their reaction for the first time they have been on a safari? What was the impression that you had? Do you remember your first time?
Oh, my first time. I cannot, I'm sure it was much earlier than my last memory of it, but I spent a lot of times in my ages of 5, 6, 7 in the field when my grandfather was writing books. So, you know, I've had the privilege of actually spending time in forest rest houses and sitting in a hide for many hours and getting restless because my grandfather wanted to take some bird, you know, take a picture of some photography. It's always, every time you see a tiger, even today for that matter, is amazing and a new experience. You know, it's not like you saw tigers all your life and you get over it and you're bored. No, it is such an adrenaline rush because it's almost every time you track a tiger, the alarm calls, the pug marks, the understanding of what is happening in the jungle and trying to explain to somebody, and then suddenly the tiger walks out on the road is just, it's the best game you can play. You know, simple, you know, to track a tiger and do it live while you're there. And similarly, you know, my children have almost grown up in the wild when they were younger. They literally, when my Jamtara camp was formed, they spent 20 days, 30 days at a time in the jungle in a particular place. And I hope I can get back to it because they're just getting that age, you know, 3 and 6, so still young. They're just getting that age when I want them to go back and really realize, you know, I've luckily taught them how to, you know, catch a spider nicely at the house, put it in the container, take it outside. So I'm doing my bit I can here, but I'm still restricted from actually being in the bush and giving them that exposure that I had, which is very pleasurable for me.
Thank you so much, Amit. I mean, this has been amazing. It is the next best thing to being there. From how you explained your own experience, I think I still have goosebumps. They are majestic animals, and as you said, they are the ones that keep the ecosystem healthy. And I certainly remember my trip as if it was yesterday, and it's an amazing destination. And thank you all for you are doing to conserve it. Thanks all to all of our participants for the part that they are playing in it. And thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up our presentation today. Thank you again to everyone who joined us. Thank you so much to Amit and to Palin for your expertise and just great photography and videos. We really enjoyed it. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar probably early next week sometime. So, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. So if you missed any part or would like to rewatch any part, that'll be available for you. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.